You've seen surfers on the sea, but what about rivers? Every year, thousands descend on the sleepy hollow of Gloucestershire to watch and surf the tidal bore on the River Severn. Hi, we're here at the University of Gloucestershire to see Professor Owen Jones. He's here to tell us the science behind this natural phenomenon and the interesting myths that we used to explain it before science settled the whole debate.
A proper tidal bore is a wave of water that washes up a river as the tide comes in. The tide rises in the sea, and then the sea gets pushed up river channels. And in certain places the shape of the channel turns it into a wave. Well, the tides are caused by the gravitational pull of the moon. The moon revolves around the Earth, and the distance of the moon to the Earth varies, so that gravitational pull will change through the year, and so you'll get high tides and low tides. But it's also affected by the sun, so sometimes you get really high tides when they're working together, and sometimes you get lesser tides when the sun is counteracting the moon's force. The Norse legends have it that a giant invited the god Thor to a drinking contest, and the giant tricked Thor and attached his drinking cup to the oceans, and Thor drank and drank and drank, but he couldn't empty the cup, and he felt he'd been beaten in the drinking contest, but in fact he had drunk so much the oceans from that day on went up and down.
The animals living in and along the Severn depend on the ebb and flow of such tides too, as surfer Steve Potter points out.
The wetland area at Slimbridge, that really thrives on the tide, and there's obviously a lot of animals and particularly bird life that thrives on the tide coming in and out, and the food source it brings in. It also brings up the alvars as well, doesn't it?
Alvars are young eels, regularly caught for centuries when the bore came in, and are part of artist Anthony Leon's study into the river's ecosystems.
It used to be a very big industry on the Severn Estuary, but the eel population has almost disappeared.
Anthony and Owen are only too aware of how a tidal barrage may wipe out the bore totally.
And all these would be basically dams which would let the water in, and then when the tide goes out it'd be released, and it might generate electricity, but it means a lot of the intertidal lands and the tidal range in the top of the estuary would be reduced.
Riding the bore itself requires some skilled maneuvering and smart science.
The wave doesn't have a huge amount of power, so obviously a longer board, you need a longer board to be able to maintain your ride length for longer. And you'll see a lot of surfers just lying down on the wave, getting themselves steady before they stand up. Well, the longboard provides you with more length and more volume, which means you can catch smaller waves, but also you can ride for a further distance. There's also more stability. So, for example, like if you've got a longer, bigger fin like this to the back of the board, you've got a lot more stability.
The Severn Bore remains the go-to spot for local surfers.
Probably on and off about 3 years. Yeah, the last year or so, probably every bore that's come, every tide.
But balancing the need for flood defences and harnessing energy with wildlife conservation is a delicate act. Who knows how much more time the Severn Bore has?